One question that I get asked a lot, David, if you had no hardware and you had to mix only in the box, what plugins would you use on your 2-bus to get the analog vibe or to try to replicate your hardware chain? I found some combination that can definitely get you going. Let's take a look. Hello everyone, welcome back to MixBus TV. Hope you're having a great day. Before we start, as usual, check the info box down below for my mixing courses on Pro Mix Academy, free plugins, special discounts and offers. And if you want to support the channel, but most important, if you really want to learn how to mix and master professionally, click the join button down here, become a MixBus TV member, access the already big and always growing library of full mixing courses, start to finish, mastering courses, special videos, and a lot more. You also get mixed consultations with me via Skype or email. Let's get to the video. All right, I'm gonna make another video giving you 3 to 5 combinations of 2-bus processing, which include saturation, compression, and special processing. That's gonna be another video. In this one, I came up with a combination with a couple of different options to somewhat trying to emulate my very muscular and complicated hardware analog chain on the 2-bus, which if you're not familiar with my setup, especially my latest setup, which got a lot bigger, it sees first the NEVS 542s usually, tape emulators, saturation and transformers, then the SSL Fusion, which is a different type of saturation with a vintage drive, the Violet EQ, the high frequency compressor, the stereo image. Not that all these things are on all the time, but they are all available in the mix and I mix and match according to the song. Insert in the Fusion, I have the Mastering SPL PQ equalizer, this one full parametric. After this, there's the Wes Audio mastering compressor right here. And after the mastering compressor, it can be the Mag EQ or the Synth EQ by Heritage, or both or none. And after that, that is the Spacecraft on the Moon by Methylane hardware, okay? If I'm not using it in a mix for something else, I punch in one of my 2 Fatzos in somewhere in the chain, but it's extremely rare. It's more common in mastering that. So I came up with this combination of plugins which somehow would get me close. I feel like it would get me close. So the first stage would be the tape emulators with the saturation and the transformers, which is one of the most complicated unit to actually emulate. There's no plugin for that. And even the combination, the many combination that I tried in past only get me almost close to that. So the first one is one of the hardest link in the chain. A few years ago, I used to use a plugin by Mac DSP, and it's the Analog Channel 2, which I don't have anymore, but I will put the image here. And I found that that one, especially for the low bump that the NEVS give me, was kind of close, the closest I could get. You know, I don't have that plugin anymore, so we're gonna replace this with, first thing, Tape by Softtube. Even if this one doesn't give me the low bump, that on the NEVS can be a 50 or 130, okay? This gives me the saturation side of it, and it kind of takes away the digital feeling of the track. It's a very subtle type of saturation, so you can put it on the 2-bus, you can mix into it, and you can adjust as you go.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it, it's do or die now. And my soul is tainted, should've been out by now. Running out of patience, losing my mind now. Feel like I gotta watch my back, I'm a danger. Used to be homie, some changed up, hard working, not to say look, just caked up. I made up my mind, I gotta get the bag. Shorty, I am not.
It helps a little bit, it smooths out the transient, it gives the material a little more organic feeling, and the B-tape, it does have a little bit of bump there, but these would be my first processing. I would have to simulate usually I keep the bump at 50, which is 15 IPS on the NEVS. The closest I can get is with the API 55B with the bump at 50 and around 2 dB. So.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it, it's do or die now. And my soul is tainted, should've been out by.
Okay, these two processes gets me close to that first stage with the NEV. I still miss at this point my transformer. If I use the red transformer, that it's a little bit of brightness. This is a very specific kind of brightness, which unfortunately is not possible to get with an EQ. So the next plugin to help me with that will be the Sapphire, which is a very sort of clean saturator, meaning it's very versatile. It has different types of a harmonic collection, all these letters here, and it's versatile enough, even if it's not the same, to get me in that ballpark. For example, if I was to use the red transformer, that's the bright one. Let's try to get there. I'm gonna turn the tape off because it's just the wobble and just use the harmonics. So those transformers, especially the red one, it acts basically almost on the high frequency side. I'm going to cut here in the EQ section the action of these harmonics added to try to simulate that, okay? I'm gonna do the same thing for both.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is sainted. Should've been out by now, running out of patience, losing my mind now. Feel like I gotta watch my back, I'm in danger. Used to be homie, some changed up, hard working, now to say look, just caked up, I made up.
Let's say these settings are similar, okay? Similar enough. Alternatively to the Sapphire, we could probably try an exciter like Vitamin, for example. I'm just giving you options.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is sainted. Should've been.
Between the two, I actually, now that I listen to it, I kind of prefer the Vitamin for that top end that the Neves give me on at least the red transformer. Now the blue transformer is more complicated because it softens, it rounds off the top end, and it adds an additional bump in the low mid range. So let's say these three kind of give me ballpark, these four plugins actually kind of give me ballpark my first stage, okay? So the two Neves. Then after that, there will be the Fusion. This is again another piece that is very hard to emulate because it basically has 1, 2, 3, 4 stages plus the transformer, which I don't really use, and the input and output. So for this one, you would need, for example, for the vintage drive, you would need some exciter, some saturator again. In this case, I would go for the Ozone Exciter Advanced. Now, the vintage drive is not multi-band, but it affects mostly the mid-range, like a large portion of the mid-range, and it kind of leaves the top and the bottom away. So even if it's not a multi-band, probably to emulate that, I would do something like this, okay? I would bypass top and bottom and try to find one of the saturation, one of the algorithm here, probably analog or retro. You want something that it's mild, okay? You don't run that vintage drive that hard to try to give that color, that distortion in the mid-range, that richness.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is sainted. Should've been out by now, running out of patience, losing my mind now. Feel like I gotta watch my back, I'm in danger. Used to be homie, some changed up, hard working, not as.
Again, not the same, but this could get you closer, ballpark at least. And then if you want to emulate my HF compressor, which I actually use quite a lot on the Fusion, the best thing, it would be probably the Vase de-esser. This one band here, I would bypass this because it's basically how it works. It's just, think of it as a band selective shelf that compresses everything from the crossover frequency and up. So just like this.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is sainted. Should've been out by.
Then there is the stereo image, which is very complicated. The width is just it's just a width, so you could emulate that with, let's say, a free plugin like Stereo Control A1 and just open up the stereo width, or S1 for example. The problem is we don't know if the width acts on full band or not. I actually don't feel like it's working on the full spectrum. It's probably cut somewhere. But the problem here would be the space part, which basically stereo enhances a specific low mid range. And again, this could be done with the ozone imager. Again, you activate the multiband and you kind of ballpark it that range that the space knob enhances the stereo field of.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is tainted. Should've been up by now.
Something like this. Now if we deactivate everything.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found.
Ballpark there again. After the fusion, the first thing, the other processor that is in the chain is my SPL mastering EQ. Now, during mixing, I gotta be honest, I don't use this one that much. It's more a mastering unit. This is basically an insane headroom full parametric EQ. It's on the transparent side, but it still imparts a specific kind of sound. Now, there's no plugin for this, and to be honest, in mixing, mastering is a whole different ballgame. But in mixing, I use it so lightly when I use it, it's just to correct a few things or enhance things here and there, that you can basically try to emulate the best you can with a full parametric EQ, which could be Ozone EQ. I like this one. Another one would be HEQ from Waves, which also, if you want, add some kind of analog feel to it if you want. But I would keep this one off, and I would just use this as opposed to a full parametric because of the different pre-selected curves. When you use a parametric EQ on the 2-bus, you should have some limitation, especially if you're at the beginning. You're not gonna emulate the SPL with plugins, so this one gives you a quick way. For example, if you go here in the mid-range and we scroll the different types of belts, we can hear quickly which one it works better.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is tainted. Should've been out by now, running out of patience, losing my mind now.
All right, this is a finished mix, so I'm not trying to find like any specific frequency. It's just to try to emulate everything. So I'm gonna bypass these two. Now, the next in the chain would be the SSL type compressor, in this case, the West Audio mastering compressor. Now, the problem is that all these stages of analog do some saturation and some transient shaving. Whether you want to do this stage, because at this point here you have the options of doing it before compression or after, you can insert, for example, the saturate from Newfangled Audio. Now, this would be in the top 1 dB of reduction of transient, okay? Because this is a cumulative effect of the tape, of the fusion, of everything else, okay? For now, I'm gonna put it before the compressor, just as an example.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is tainted. Should've been out by now, running out of patience, losing my mind now. Feel like I gotta watch my back, I'm a danger. Used to be homie, some changed up, hard working, now to say look, just caked up. I made up my mind, I gotta get the bag. Shorty, I am not the one.
I feel like a curve between 30 and 50% would probably emulate the best, and after this stage, there would be the compressor itself. Now, I mentioned this before many times, I can't really find an SSL type of compressor plugin that I'm satisfied with, so I'm gonna give you a few choices. One that I like is the Waves G compressor, which at least gives me that glue factor and that grit if I want to go color, even though it narrows the stereo image a little bit and it doesn't have a high pass filter. So for me, that would be a big problem because I always run it there. So this is just for the tone, for the color. I would have to limit the use and how much I lean into the compressor in this case because I don't have the HPF filter.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'm a rider.
Unfortunately here, this compressor has a THD, which is another stage of saturation, which acts in the mid-range. It has an additional transformer, a Cardinal, which adds a lot of bottom end, which I rarely use, but you know, the absence of sidechain filter here would be a problem. I could swap it with something else. For example, the TRX, which at least has a high pass filter, but you know, at this point you can insert whatever 2-bus compressor of your choice, okay? I happen to like this one, but you can use anything. Let's try this.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'm a rider till my fucking time's out, so I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is sainted. Should've been out by now, running out of patience, losing my mind now. Feel like I gotta watch my back, I'm in danger.
Again, I don't feel that sense of bigness that the hardware gives me, but it couldn't be a choice. You can change it with everything. After the compression, there would be one of my 2 EQs or both, because for example, I could use the synth just for the filters and the mag EQ. So there is actually a plugin for the mag EQ, which would be this one, and it's close enough. I actually don't use the airband that much in mixing, believe it or not. I prefer, for example, the top end of the SPL because it's more natural, and the mag is awesome, but even the hardware, it's kind of added, you can tell, right? And on soundtracks is what you want, totally, like pop, hip hop, something like that. But for the most part, when I'm mixing, I'm more leaning towards natural sound in top end, and then I have other things to enhance, like the transformers and everything else. What I like on the mag EQ, and I end up using it often, is something that looks like this. So a little cut on the sub and a little boost at 40.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'm a rider till my fucking time's out, so I gotta make it. It's do or die.
Okay, unfortunately the airband, believe it or not, is pretty far from the hardware. So even a 40, even if I go up to 2, I can already hear it. I can already hear it. That is like a little brittle, a little glassy. So I never go over that. And even just that, especially with a vitamin, we added a little bit of top end, already feels a little brush. But the bottom end is kind of close. It doesn't have the weight of the hardware, but it's close enough. You can compensate with other things when mixing. So this would be the next step.
No sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost.
Alternatively to this, this was a bunch of options for you to maybe try on the 2-bus, or having them right there, ready to go if you need them, if you feel like your mix is missing something. All viable options for the 2-bus. You get the idea. You have basically the rundown, and you can experiment, you know, any way you want. In another video, I'll give you a few options with less plugins. Let's say like not more than 3 or 4 processing, pre-cooked, so to speak, chains of plugins that you can use on the 2-bus. I will try to do it for genres if possible. And this is it for this video. I hope it was useful. I hope you liked it. And if you did, please don't forget to leave a like. Join the channel, become a member if you really want to learn how to mix and mastering. Full courses in which you see all my settings on full mixes, mastering, both for the hardware and the plugins in details, and a lot more. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time.
Hands on my neck, hands grip my throat. Lift me up, man, take control.